In the Goulburn Valley near the town of Seymour, 3 railway goods sheds sit still in a paddock full of livestock. If you've ever caught the train between Tallerook and Seymour before, you might have sped past them wondering, what are they doing here, out of use and in the middle of nowhere? Earlier in the year, my friend and I had that exact thought, so we decided to investigate. What we discovered was a location full of railway history. We got off the train at Tallerook, the old junction with the Mansfield line, which opened to Yea in 1883 and was extended to Mansfield in 1891. Rail motor passenger services to Mansfield ceased on the 28th of May 1977, and the whole line was closed on the 8th of November the next year. Tallerook also features a crest located to the north of the platforms. This whole area is quite hilly. The Mansfield line had to tackle some mountainous terrain, running in several cuttings, bridges, and through the Cheviot Tunnel. Tallerook was chosen as the junction point, as this is where the Goulburn River had carved a path through the range. The Mansfield line continues to serve the surrounding communities, with the Great Victorian Rail Trail bringing walkers and riders into this beautiful part of the state. After a quick look around the town, we set off to ride our bikes to the sheds. We rode for about a kilometre on the trail before turning off into our first piece of rail history, Schoolhouse Lane, which used to be the road to the school in Tallerook. Keep riding down the lane for 4.5 kilometres and you'll reach the railway line. If you think the name Schoolhouse Lane sounds familiar, then you'd be correct. It was here at the level crossing where a temporary terminus for the North Eastern Railway was set up after an extension from Essendon Station. The actual planned terminus was to be Seymour, 4 kilometres to the north. So why was a temporary one set up here? Well, remember the river I mentioned earlier? The Goulburn, located in between Schoolhouse Lane and Seymour. It required many bridges to path across. And what was meant to be the first cylinder bridge in the colony and key to linking the railway across the main watercourse of the river hadn't been built yet. The reason? Wrought iron girders needed for the bridge's support, which due to a lack of facilities in Australia were manufactured in England, had been ordered too late. This resulted in a 4-month delay to the construction of the bridge and railway into Seymour. After a successful trial trip a week earlier, regular passenger services to the temporary terminus at Schoolhouse Lane commenced on the 18th of April 1872. Platforms for both passengers and goods, as well as an engine shed, ash pit, water supply for engines, and a derrick crane for goods were all built at the terminus. Buildings for the station platform, locomotive drivers, and a tent with a chimney for the station master were also supplied. Refreshments were provided by the company who operated facilities at Werribee and Spencer Street stations. Construction of the line past Seymour was already well underway when the bridge over the Goulburn River was finally completed on the 25th of June 1872. On this day, a service with goods for the railway construction camp at Avenel was the first ever train to bridge its way into Seymour, seeing an end to the rickety timber pile bridge set up temporarily to move supplies across the river. 2 months later, on the 24th of August, satisfactory testing with 2 of the state's heaviest engines hauling wagons of rail across the bridge was completed, and 2 days after that, on the 26th of August 1872, the line to Seymour was officially opened to the public. Schoolhouse Lane was now no longer needed and was closed later that year on the 20th of November. However, the area's history doesn't stop here. In August 1882, funds were allocated towards the duplication of the line between Melbourne and a point south of the Goulburn River, with a second bridge over the Goulburn simply being too expensive to build. These works were completed on October 18, 1886, where the line reached Goulburn Junction, now known as Dysart, located around the vicinity of Schoolhouse Lane. It was here that a signal box was needed to control traffic over the single-track bridge into Seymour. This opened a day before completion of duplication on the 17th of October and was named Goulburn Junction. It closed in 1925, with the points and signals now being controlled remotely from Seymour. Soon after duplication of the line, on the 4th of February 1889, a siding at the southern side of Schoolhouse Lane opened, being named after this road. This was later changed to Dysart Siding on the 5th of December 1904. Its main purpose and source of traffic was firewood, an essential material for heating and cooking for the rapidly expanding population of Melbourne. Things stayed pretty much the same in Dysart until on the 1st of September 1939, on the other side of the world, a war began. World War II prompted many changes in the area. Improved communication was a priority during the time period. A crucial part of this would be the efficiency of the Melbourne-Sydney rail line, and so it was decided to minimise delays that a second bridge would be built over the Goulburn River. This was completed on the 17th of May 1942. Two broad gauge bridges over the Goulburn remained in place until a standard gauge line from Albury to Melbourne opened in 1962. Although the rest of the line from Melbourne to Seymour remained as two broad gauge tracks with the addition of standard gauge line, only the two existing bridges were used across the Goulburn. The two broad gauge tracks diverging onto the original 1872 bridge, and the standard gauge crossing the river on the later added 1942 bridge. This configuration remains to this day. The other major and most visible change in the area was the construction of the Dysart Defence Siding. The remnants of this were what prompted this trip to start with. As the siding's name suggests, it was constructed as a siding for military goods and supplies. But why build it here? This is due to the area's close proximity to the Puckapunyal military base, which opened in November 1939 as a main military base for Victoria. It's only 13.5 kilometres away by road, without any major towns to travel through on the way. Dysart was effectively a railhead for Puckapunyal and several other army camps in the area. A signal box was provided for this area in 1942, but closed in 1987, when signalling was moved to Seymour. The layout of the sidings on Victorian Railways diagrams looks like this, which I believe would transpose to looking something like this in real life. As well as being used for military trains, the siding was also used by a nearby sheep grazer, Tom Teagan. There aren't many pictures of the sidings in use, but here are a few of soldiers lining up to receive new uniform before continuing on to Puckapunyal. After the war, the sidings saw less and less use, but were often used to store excess wagons. They also featured in several films, including the 1980 television miniseries on the life of Ned Kelly named The Last Outlaw, and the 1982 film The Man from Snowy River. After the closure of Dysart Signal Box on the 3rd of May 1987, the sidings were no longer seen as necessary, and also closed, with tracks being lifted soon after. What remains today is pretty much everything else. The platforms and embankments can still be noticed, and the shed lay dormant, and although overgrown, you can still make out where the tracks once lay. If you would like to go visit, please don't try to enter the property as it's privately owned, and instead view the sheds from behind the fence line. The owner has informed me that due to the shed's age, they are not structurally sound, and walls and bits of roof often have to be replaced after storms. Once used to help supply a nation at war, the sheds now lack a purpose, and sit only to be watched by those in transit. So if ever you travel past them, consider the important role this area and these sheds once played. Happy travels, and I'll see you next time.